Right then guys, it's PSL here, and today I'm here with a different video on F1 2016. Now in this video I'm here to show you guys what happens when you get all the way to the end of the 10th season in F1 2016's career mode. How much has the pecking order changed, who's been winning the championships, and crucially, does Mercedes' dominance ever end? Well, what I did was start a career mode with the Sauber team and with Felipe Nasr as my teammate, and then I advanced through the seasons as quickly as possible. So just as a reminder, as of version 1.7 of the game, this is how the pecking order starts off. Mercedes are on top, way ahead of Red Bull and Ferrari. Williams are in a class of their own in 4th, with Force India, Toro Rosso, McLaren and Haas all close to each other on pace. Then Renault are the 9th quickest, a fair way behind Haas, but also distinctly ahead of Manor in 10th and Sauber in 11th and last place. What I did was I tried to develop the Sauber as much as I could, so that meant I did the practice sessions to try and get as many resource points as possible. So most of the time I did the track acclimatization and qualifying pace programs, as well as the 5 bonus objectives that the team sets. Generally I skipped the tyre management program just for the sake of time. Additionally, I took part in the other practice sessions, meaning that I would start a lap and then instantly end the session just so I got those extra 11 resource points per practice session. I often didn't do qualifying, as while you can do it and get resource points from exceeding the team's qualifying target, it's better to save time by going straight to the race, and that's because you get resource points in the race for the total positions gained from where you qualified. And as for the race, I would just pause and simulate it, again purely for the sake of time, so I could advance through the seasons as quickly as possible. And that's really it. Rinse and repeat to get through the seasons as quickly as possible and see just how much the pecking order changes. Even heading into only the second race of the first season, Ferrari overtook Red Bull, Toro Rosso passed Force India, and Sauber, thanks to me, displaced Manor from the top 10. And again, that's purely on car speed, not championship position. Also, a little trick I found out a while ago and made into a separate video that is up on the channel, is that if you're in a race that's in full wet conditions, such as I am here in Monaco, manually choose to start the race on intermediate tyres. This is because the game doesn't realise that the tyres are incorrect for the track conditions, and so as long as you simulate the race, the game will ignore track conditions entirely, and thus it's an easy win. So I was able to win the Monaco Grand Prix in a Sauber by almost a minute. Now the reason this trick is so useful is because it stops Sauber from firing me, because every now and then I would get a decent result and I would finish higher up in the Drivers' Championship than they expected me to, so this is why you'll see I score quite a lot of points in some seasons, and it's just because I do this trick. Moving on, and halfway into the first season, the only real change is that Haas slipped to being the second worst team ahead of Manor, and Red Bull re-overtook Ferrari to have the second quickest car. In the end, Nico Rosberg won the Drivers' Championship, just like in real life, although here he did it by a massive 29 points ahead of Lewis Hamilton. The rest of the championship is pretty similar to that of the real life standings, with the only differences being that Vettel and Ricciardo swap places, as well as Raikkonen and Verstappen. The only other noteworthy things are how well Massa did in comparison to real life, as well as how Jenson Button finished ahead of his teammate Fernando Alonso in the Drivers' Championship. In the constructors' standings, once you exclude Sauber, who obviously are much higher up because of the wet weather glitch that I exploited, once you swap around Ferrari and Red Bull, as well as Williams and Force India, it's pretty accurate. Although in this season, Renault were unable to score any points and finished behind Manor in the championship, which isn't accurate to real life. At the end of season 2, it all changed on the grid. Sauber, thanks to my efforts, ended the season with the 3rd fastest car, and Force India overtook Red Bull to be the 4th quickest team on the grid. And Haas once again slipped behind Renault to be the 2nd worst team on the grid. But this time it was Lewis Hamilton who won the Drivers' Championship, and impressively he won it with a race to spare, and in the end took it by 32 points. Looking at the Drivers' Championship, and with just how rigid it is, with teammates being directly next to each other, the Constructors' Championship holds very few surprises. Kudos to Felipe Nasr, who scored 38 points that season, which meant Sauber beat Red Bull in the Constructors' standings. Meanwhile, Williams fell way off the top and only scored 50 points all season. Renault, Manor and now even Haas all failed to score points. And then there was the quite frankly remarkable third season. At the Chinese Grand Prix I maxed out the car's potential, and even then I was still behind the ever dominant Mercedes. Although having said that, Sauber became a force to be reckoned with, as evidenced by the string of 8 podium finishes, 6 of which were wins in the first half of the season alone. However, that amazing run did dry up as I couldn't develop the car any further whilst every other team could. At the Austrian Grand Prix, the podium was myself taking the win, having simulated the race that was in dry conditions from start to finish, with Nico Rosberg in second and Felipe Nasr in third. That's a double podium for Sauber earned on genuine pace, a feat not seen for the team since the 2008 Canadian Grand Prix. Even better, I won the championship, with Sauber having simulated through the entire season, and at the Circuit of the Americas no less, which means I won the championship with 3 races to spare. And that's bearing in mind that come the end of the season, the Sauber car was only the 5th fastest one out there, which makes the championship win all the more impressive. McLaren meanwhile had the 3rd best car overall, with Williams re-overtaking Sauber. Haas's downward movement carried on as they ended the year with the slowest package and by a noticeable gap from Manor. Sebastian Vettel finished the season in 2nd and ahead of both Mercedes drivers. Then the rest of the championship, with some minor discrepancies, went like this. It was Raikkonen who beat both McLarens, who beat both Red Bulls, who beat both Force Indias, although having said that, Sergio Perez finished ahead of both Williams, whilst Hülkenberg ended the season behind both of them. Then it's both Toro Rosso's, Renault's, Manors and Haas's. Daniel Kvyat, as well as all of the drivers in the bottom 3 teams, all failed to score points. Season 4 and the pecking order has changed somewhat in the middle of the pack. Force India have passed Red Bull and Williams to be the 4th fastest team again and right up there with McLaren. Williams have also overtaken Red Bull, whilst Manor are now amazingly the 9th fastest team on the grid, having overtaken Renault. Nico Rosberg ended up winning the championship again, just as he did in Season 1, and by a good 23 points over his teammate. McLaren's resurgence certainly showed as Jenson Button took 3rd in the Drivers' Championship, with Fernando Alonso finishing just behind his long-term rival, Sebastian Vettel, in 5th. Despite Red Bull ending the season slower than Force India and Williams, both of their drivers still beat both Force India drivers in the championship as well as Valtteri Bottas. Massa just edged the Red Bulls in the championship, with Ricciardo beating Verstappen by only a single point. The constructors' standings see McLaren take 2nd, showing their resurgence really is on, with Red Bull still in 4th and Force India, despite ending the year with a quicker car than Red Bull and Williams, didn't have the speed at the start of the season to beat them overall. Toro Rosso joined Renault, Manor and Haas in scoring no points all season long. As for me, well, Sauber's championship winning pace crashed hard and fast. I got on the podium in Australia, and then once the other teams continued to develop while Sauber could do no more, I didn't get a podium for the rest of the season. Season 5 ended with Mercedes maxing out their potential, going further than I thought the development line even could. Williams ended the 3rd fastest team, with Toro Rosso ending in 5th and just behind Force India. Red Bull shockingly hit an all-time low as the 7th fastest team. Manor fell behind Haas and Renault but overtook Sauber, as we can't develop the Sauber car any further, so of course everyone's going to overtake us. Nico Rosberg won the Drivers' Championship again, but this time he took it in Brazil with a race to spare. Both Mercedes drivers dominated the season and scored over 400 points each. Kimi Raikkonen beat his teammate to finish third in the Drivers' Championship, but was still a gigantic 202 points off of the top spot. Perez did well to finish fifth in the championship ahead of Button. Meanwhile, the other Force India driver of Nico Hülkenberg beat the other McLaren driver of Fernando Alonso. Both Williams drivers beat both Red Bulls, the latter of which didn't even make it into the top 10. The constructor standings makes for sobering reading for most of the grid. Mercedes have their highest scoring season of all 10 seasons, scoring 897 points, which is a whopping 380 points ahead of Ferrari. That's over 8 1-2 finishes difference. Force India took third ahead of McLaren, Williams and Red Bull. Toro Rosso scored 4 points, although 4 teams still failed to score points as Sauber scored none along with the usuals. On to Season 6, and this is where anything interesting that could have happened goes right out of the window. This is where every team has fully developed their car and what the running order is until the end of Season 10. All it is essentially is everybody's Season 1 pace but jacked up. Having said that, Force India are closer to Williams than they were at the start and Renault are much closer to Haas. But aside from that, this is basically how the game starts off. Rosberg once again won the championship by 43 points from Hamilton. The only real changes from Season 1 is that this time Ricciardo fell behind Raikkonen and Verstappen. Also this season, Fernando Alonso finished 9th in the championship, whereas in the first season he didn't even make it into the top 12. Aside from McLaren being ahead of Sauber and Renault scoring 2 points as opposed to none, the Constructors' Championship is near identical to that of the first season. 7th different season, same old results. Rosberg won the championship again with almost the exact same points gap to his teammate. Daniel Ricciardo finished 3rd in the championship as opposed to 6th last time out, and Felipe Massa beat his teammate Valtteri Bottas. Those are pretty much the only changes from the previous season. The Constructors' Championship was much the same as well. Red Bull re-overtook Ferrari for 2nd, and Haas finally upped their game to beat Toro Rosso in the championship after scoring the same amount of points as them. Renault matched their points tally from the previous year. Season 8, and it's the exact same story once again. Nico Rosberg won his 6th World Championship, with the top 6 in the Drivers' Championship remaining exactly the same as last year. In fact, the only real changes are that Valtteri Bottas moved up from 12th to 7th, Perez overtook Hülkenberg and Alonso, and Massa went from being 7th in the championship the previous year to being outside the top 12, meaning that Jenson Button re-emerges in the top 12 in 12th. The only changes in the Constructors' Championship are that Toro Rosso beat Haas and Renault failed to score any points the season after they scored 2. The second to last season now, and again it only saw a few changes from the previous year. Nico Rosberg won yet another championship, and better still for him, he won it in America, which means he won it with an impressive 3 races to spare. Raikkonen beat Verstappen to 5th, unlike last season, and Hülkenberg swapped places with Alonso in the championship, meaning they are in the same order as they were 2 seasons ago. Finally, Massa displaced Button for a top 12 spot. In the Constructors' Championship, the order remains exactly the same as the previous season. Mercedes scored 19 more points than in Season 8, Red Bull in 2nd scored 32 less points, and the points gap between Haas and Toro Rosso opened up from 4 points last year to 22. So long the short of it, all that really changed was that the field spread out further, with the top team scoring more and the bottom team scoring less. On to the last season now, and with only 3 rounds left to go, Hamilton was leading the championship by a single point. Considering the fact that Rosberg won the championship last year at the exact same venue, could Hamilton win only his 2nd championship in this 10-race season? Well, no. Nico Rosberg won yet another World Championship, meaning he has now surpassed Michael Schumacher's record of 7 world titles, as this here is Rosberg's 8th. The only changes in the championship include Verstappen, who finished 4th, having passed Vettel to be just behind his teammate. I had a quite literally pointless season, which saw Massa take 7th in the standings, and with me out of the way, meant Button once again just about claimed another top 12 spot. The Constructors' Championship holds little to get excited about either. Renault did amazingly score a single point, whilst Mercedes had their second best season ever, scoring 829 points, which is an astonishing 316 points ahead of second place Red Bull, and only their season 5 dominance beats this landslide victory for Mercedes. When I started making this video, I was expecting crazy scenes by season 10, maybe a Manor, Renault or McLaren to win the championship. And whilst in season 4 Button did finish 3rd in the standings with Alonso in 5th, and both of them even had race wins to their name that year, that's pretty much as interesting as it got. The point is that I didn't expect the performance of all the teams to peak at pretty much the same level as they all started out. So while I was expecting the whole grid to flip around, all that happened is Mercedes' tight grasp on the top of the world's premier motorsport grew even tighter. And then there's the fact that Nico Rosberg completely dominated Formula 1. I mean seriously, he won 8 titles in 10 years, became the most successful person in the sport's history, and even when it looked like Hamilton was going to beat him in the final year, he still came out on top. So is Nico Rosberg a deserving world champion? Well, from what we've seen here, I can't find any real argument to say that he isn't.